Many adults track their own sleep. I know that I do. But when was the last time you monitored your child's sleep? Did you know that children need between 9 to 13 hours of sleep a night? And when they don't get enough sleep, it impacts their ability to focus, to remember information, and to regulate their emotions. All things that are critical to their well-being on any given day. Today, we're going to dive into sleep. We're going to talk about why it's important, what happens when kids are not getting enough sleep, and what you can do to make sure your child, your teen, is getting enough sleep at night. Let's jump in.
Millions of kids struggle with learning, processing, and social emotional difficulties. These challenges interfere with their ability to reach their full potential. Dr. Karen Wilson is here to help. Her extensive background in pediatric neuropsychology and higher education have prepared her for this unique mission. Listen as she delivers content to inform, educate, and empower parents and educators. This will enable you to identify challenges that kids face and get them on the road to achieving their full potential. This is Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. I am so thrilled to be back here. It has been a while since I have recorded a new episode. I know that you've been listening to new episodes, but I actually haven't recorded a new one since before the summer. I'm recording in September, and we batched and pre-recorded a number of interviews so that we could have it out over the summer. But I pretty much spent the summer spending time with family and friends, and now I'm back with some new recordings, and I've got some exciting new interviews coming up, and I can't wait for you to listen. Today, we are going to talk about sleep, and I'm very excited about this topic. I feel passionate about this topic, and it's one of those things that we often don't think about, but it's critical. Sleep is critical for cognitive functioning, for emotional well-being, and overall health. And I've mentioned this in previous conversations and previous talks and maybe even previous podcasts. But as human beings, we spend approximately 1/3 of our lives in a state of sleep. Yet 70% of American kids and adults get insufficient sleep. So I thought that today was the perfect time to talk about sleep. We're in a transition period. I'm recording this in September. Like I said, my kids just started back at school. And for many kids, they are transitioning from a summer where they may have not had a sleep schedule. And now it's critical that they do, because they're going to be sitting in a classroom. They have to learn. They have to pay attention. They have to regulate their emotions. And kids can do all of those things better when they have a good night's sleep. Now, any person who has ever lost lots of sleep knows how sleep deprivation impacts focus, impacts the ability to concentrate, impacts memory and mood. And so the fact of the matter is that sleep is critical for mental health, and it's critical for learning. And there's actually growing recognition that many adolescents obtain insufficient sleep, poor quality of sleep, and some regard it as an epidemic of sleep deprivation among adolescents. And in children, sleep deprivation can be particularly harmful because they need more sleep than adults because of their growth and developmental needs. So the importance of sleep cannot be overestimated. Yet, many children and teens suffer from sleep problems that impact their daily functioning. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about the fact that all kids thrive when they have a regular bedtime routine. And children who do get enough sleep have a healthier immune system, which we know is particularly important at this time. We're still in the middle of a pandemic. When kids get enough sleep, they have better school performance, their behavior is better, their memory is better, and their overall mental health is better. Research shows that sleep is restorative. The body needs quiet time to process the activities of the day. And when we dream, during REM sleep, that is particularly important for learning and memory. Sleep is a period of time, and I've talked about this before, where we consolidate our memories, all of those things that we learn during the day. We're converting them from short-term to long-term memory when we sleep. And so we know that so many of the things that we do on a daily basis, we can do better when we have a good night's sleep. So how much sleep do kids actually need? For many parents, they stopped tracking sleep when their kids entered preschool when they were about 3 years old. And so I'm going to talk about some of the sleep guidelines. And this is from the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, the American Academy of Pediatrics. Children between the ages of 3 and 5 need about 10 to 13 hours of sleep. Between the ages of 6 and 12, kids need about 9 to 12 hours of sleep. And if you break that down even further, in terms of smaller age ranges, between ages of 7 and 9, so if you've got a child between the ages of 7 and 9, they need about 11 hours of sleep. That number drops to about 10 hours of sleep for children between the ages of 10 and 12. By 12 to 13 years of age, most teens need between 9.5 to 10 hours of sleep without sleeping during the day. And then by age 16, teens should be getting about 9 to 9.5 hours of sleep nightly. Now, I know that these numbers may surprise you. And if those numbers do surprise you, you are not alone. Because many parents underestimate how much sleep that they need, how much sleep their kids need, and how much they're actually getting. And I don't want people to get caught up with the numbers, because oftentimes parents can have a better idea if their child is sleeping well by looking for clues that show that a child is well rested or is having difficulty sleeping. So think about those behaviors. We'll talk about some of those rather than focusing on the numbers alone. And that's probably why the numbers reflect a range rather than an actual hard number of 11 hours of sleep. There's a range. And again, kids will differ in terms of how much sleep that they need, but you definitely want to be paying attention to that range so that they're not getting less sleep than they actually need. And, I talked about the fact that, there was a study in the United States that talked about sleep deprivation in children and adolescents, but it's not just in the United States. There was actually a study that came out, I think it was in Lancet Child and Adolescent Health, and it was a study that was done in Canada. And they looked at the sleep recommendations. They interviewed parents of children who were between the ages of 8 and 11, and only 51% of parents reported that their children were meeting the sleep guidelines. So I'm sure if we look at other countries, it's not only the United States, it's not only Canada. There are probably other places in the world where kids and adolescents are not getting adequate sleep. So what can we look for in terms of sleep deprivation? How do you know that your child isn't getting enough sleep, that your teen is not getting enough sleep? Well, there are definitely some signs of sleep deprivation, and I'm going to talk to you about some of them so that you can kind of have a mental checklist of what that looks like, and so that you can be paying attention to that as well. So when kids are not getting enough sleep, some signs of sleep deprivation include frequent awakening during the night, difficulty falling asleep, daytime sleepiness. Some kids can be more irritable when they don't get enough sleep. And a sleep-deprived person, a sleep-deprived child, has more difficulties with concentration and focus, and they may be less likely to take in the information that they need in order to remember it later. So they may seem a little more forgetful. For younger kids, you might see more nightmares or bedwetting. There can be teeth grinding or clenching, and even headaches when kids are not getting enough sleep. In general, you can tell a child is getting enough sleep if that child can fall asleep in under 30 minutes after putting them to bed, if they can wake up with relative ease and without consistent nagging or prodding or other means of trying to get that child up and out the door or up and out of bed. And then also paying attention to whether a child seems mentally alert throughout the day and does not seem to need a nap. And so those are things that will tell you whether or not a child might be struggling with sleep. And when kids don't get enough sleep, it can really impact their behavior. It can impact their mood. It can impact their cognitive functioning. What the research shows is that insufficient sleep in school-age children is associated with poor attention, difficulties with executive functioning, and we've talked about executive functioning on this podcast. Executive functioning is your ability to inhibit distractors, your ability to plan, to organize, to manage your time, to shift your focus from one thing to another, to monitor your behavior and your performance while you're completing tasks. Those are all areas that are impacted when individuals get insufficient sleep. And insufficient sleep is also associated with memory problems. Like I said before, sleep is a time when we're consolidating those memories. We're converting those short-term memories to long-term memories. And when we disrupt sleep, we don't encode them into long-term memories. Insufficient sleep, as a result, can cause rapid decline in school performance. And you also can see behavioral problems in children and in adolescents. There are mood problems that are associated with sleep deprivation. You get more anxiety. There's more depression. There's more difficulty with emotional regulation. And you can see more of a stress response when kids are not getting sufficient sleep. And so we know that sleep is important for cognitive functioning. I talked about executive functioning, and we think about school-age children, but early sleep patterns are important as well, because they've done research where they've looked at the sleep of kids who are as young as 3 years old. And what they found is that early sleep problems are actually predictive of ADHD symptoms when those children are in the 4th grade. And early sleep problems in a number of studies have been associated with greater ADHD symptoms later in life. I'm not saying that sleep deprivation causes ADHD. I'm just saying that when kids have problems with sleep early on, they're more likely to show symptoms of ADHD later in life. And some researchers actually think that early sleep loss impacts the way the front part of the brain develops. And that critical part of the brain, that prefrontal cortex, which is developing over time and continues to develop and develop connections all the way into the mid-20s. When kids have early sleep loss, it causes daytime inattention, and they feel that may interfere with the development of that frontal lobe at a really critical developmental time. And what the research shows that even an hour difference, you can see a difference in inattention between kids who get less than 10 hours of sleep and those who get 11 hours or more of sleep. So even an hour difference can make a difference in terms of inattention, difficulties with cognitive functioning, difficulties with sleep. The research shows that fewer hours of sleep at night is associated with lower academic performance in teens. And we also know that making changes in sleep schedules to accommodate for more sleep may help to improve memory and overall academic performance. So we think that teens are getting older, that they may need less sleep, when in actuality, they require more sleep, not less. We also know that with teens, with adolescents, their sleep cycles begin to shift up to 2 hours later, right around puberty. But at the same time, most high schools are requiring students to get to school earlier and earlier. And this is one of the reasons why the American Academy of Pediatrics has been advocating for middle school and high school students to delay the start of class to 8:30 a.m. or later. And there have actually been some school districts that have delayed school start times by as much as an hour and a half. And there's been research that has showed that students who do not have to get up as early to attend school had better sleep, they had better attendance, and they were less likely to be depressed. So there are definitely advantages to ensuring that children and adolescents are getting adequate sleep. But we also know that sleep is particularly a difficult challenge for adolescents because there are so many things that they could be doing rather than going to sleep. But again, I want to emphasize that with less sleep, adolescents, teens show increases in sleepiness. They show more inattention, so they have more difficulty focusing during the day. They actually show more oppositional behavior, and they seem to be more sluggish, right? They have less energy than their peers who are getting adequate sleep. And for those children and adolescents who have ADHD, there may be an exacerbation of attention problems in those students when they're not getting enough sleep. And Dr. Joel Nigg, who was on this podcast in episode 40, he has a really great chapter in his book, Getting Ahead of ADHD, where he talks about the relationship between ADHD and sleep. So if you're interested in that particular topic, make sure you check out episode 40 and you pick up that book, Getting Ahead of ADHD. I'll be sure to link it in the show notes. But what Dr. Nigg talks about in his book is that ADHD is associated with an increase in behaviorally related sleep problems. So that means that kids with ADHD are more likely to kind of challenge parents with respect to not wanting to go to bed or having behavioral problems around bedtime. And as a result, they're not getting sufficient sleep. And we know that, again, sleep is essential for paying attention. It's essential for memory. And if kids are already struggling with attention and memory consolidation because of ADHD, we don't want to make those difficulties worse. So we want to make sure that they're getting enough sleep. So what can you do as a parent? If your child, your teen is struggling with sleep, you're seeing some of those signs of sleep deprivation, what are some things that you can do? Well, there's a number of things you can do. And I'm going to put another link in the show notes to the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, which outlines a number of healthy habits with respect to sleep. But I also want to talk about some here so that at the end of this episode, you'll have some good action items that you can go to and implement in your home that can help your kids. One of the things you can do to help kids get a better night's sleep, get adequate sleep, is to keep to a regular daily routine with respect to sleep. That means having a sleep schedule, making sure kids are going to bed about the same time every night, and that you have a daily routine that might look like a shower, brushing teeth, time to read, and then going to bed. The other thing you want to do is to avoid overscheduling. Right now, we're getting back into school, and in addition to having homework, many children have scheduled evening activities. They might have sports games, they might have practice, they might have music lessons, other appointments, and those other appointments may pose challenges to getting a good night's sleep, particularly if homework is being delayed because of these other extracurricular activities. So you really want to look at your child's schedule and make sure they're not overscheduled, and they're not overscheduled in a way where their extracurricular activities are impacting their sleep schedule and getting in the way of them getting a good night's sleep. The other thing that parents can do is remove distractions in the bedroom. And I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying this, but you really need to get the television and mobile devices out of a child's bedroom. Most of the experts are saying use the bedroom only for sleep, not for television, not for doing homework to the extent that you can. I know that for some living spaces, you have to do both in the same place, but at least keep the bed for sleep. So even if there's a desk in the room where kids are doing homework, the bed should be a place for sleep. They shouldn't be doing homework on their bed. And at the same time, you don't want to use the bed for a time for using their smartphone or a tablet or for playing video games. Again, you want the bed to be associated with sleep. The extent that you can, you want to keep devices out of the bedroom, and because that will help improve the quality of sleep. And, we've talked about devices on this podcast. And if you want to know more about screen devices and screen time, check out episode 24 with Dr. Allison Kawa. We talk a lot about screen time and how that impacts functioning. But what we know about screen exposure is that it can impact sleep. And that's one of the reasons why I'm mentioning it here. The other thing that parents can do is to really, again, control that media exposure before bedtime. You want to make sure that kids are avoiding media screens for at least an hour before they go to bed. And that's because the light from mobile devices, from tablet screens, contains that blue light, which can suppress melatonin. And melatonin is a hormone that promotes and regulates sleep. And so when those blue lights are on them right before they go to sleep, it can actually delay the onset of sleep and, again, contribute to sleep deprivation. Parents should make sure that your child's room is dark and cool. Darkness also promotes sleep because melatonin, like I just mentioned, is released in response to darkness. And so again, having a dark room promotes sleep. Also, having a cooler room temperature promotes sleep. And it also reduces sweating, which can be incredibly uncomfortable and disrupt sleep. So one of the things I want to do is mention that if you're a parent and you're listening to this podcast and you're concerned about your child's sleep, your teen's sleep, also talk to their teachers about their alertness at school. See if there's any daytime sleepiness that the teachers are observing, because again, kids are in school for most of the day and teachers kind of have a front row seat to the alertness of your child. So speaking to them, particularly if you're concerned about your child's sleep. You also want to talk to your child's pediatrician about any sleep issues, any sleep-related concerns, and tell your child's doctor about sleep patterns and ask if there's anything that you can do better to help your child fall asleep at night. So hopefully those are some tips that can get you started as we, again, transition to a new academic year, as we transition to a need for regular sleep schedules and to kids getting adequate sleep at night. But the other thing I want to mention is that it's not only kids and adolescents that need sleep. Adults need sleep too. And so it's really important that parents make sufficient sleep a family priority. And this is because when you establish good sleep habits for yourself, you're actually modeling that behavior for your children. Making sleep a priority for yourself shows your children, shows your teen that it's an important part of living a healthy lifestyle, just like brushing your teeth, just like eating a healthy diet, and just like exercising regularly. And someone once said that everything we do, we can do better with a good night's sleep. That includes parenting. And kids, teens can definitely do better with their cognitive functioning, with their alertness, with their attention, with regulating their emotions when they get a good night's sleep. I hope you found this information helpful in this podcast episode. I really felt it was important to talk about sleep, particularly as we're transitioning back to a school year, a new school year, but also revisiting during the academic year as kids start to take on more responsibilities, more extracurricular activities. It's important to keep checking in to make sure that kids are getting adequate sleep. If you've enjoyed this podcast episode, if you've learned something new, let me know. Email me at drkiwilson@childnexus.com. I check all my emails. Also, send me a DM on Instagram at Child Nexus Community. And if you want more information about topics related to kids who think, learn differently, experience the world differently, join my email list at childnexus.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus. For more resources, visit us online at childnexus.com.